The movie opened in Budapest. CIA Chief of Station Ben Malloy oversees an operation to intercept intelligence being passed from a Turkish informant to Russian operatives. The exchange is led by Yevgeny, the Russian Chief of Station, who has just arrived with his men. The CIA team identifies the Turkish mole, and Ben signals his agents to intervene. One operative poses as a Russian agent and retrieves the intel, but Yevgeny quickly realizes the deception. A struggle ensues as his men attempt to stop the CIA operatives, but despite their efforts, the agents successfully escape with the data. Standing nearby, Ben calls out to Yevgeny, who remarks that he wishes Ben worked for him. Yevgeny, having hacked Ben's communications, is aware of his wedding anniversary and the dinner he has planned with his wife. Reflecting on his own past, Yevgeny expresses regret over losing his wife due to their line of work, but still offers Ben a sincere anniversary wish. Later, Ben purchases a rose and meets his wife, Farah, who is also a CIA agent, before heading to dinner. As she bids farewell to colleagues, the building suddenly erupts in a devastating explosion, killing her. Weeks later, Ben, unable to move past his grief, resigns from his position as Chief of Station. He struggles to adjust to life without Farah and attempts to reach out to his son, Nick, an IT student, but only reaches voicemail. Meanwhile, in Croatia, Nick notices the missed call but hesitates to respond, confiding in his girlfriend, Veronique, that he doesn't know how to communicate with his father. Soon after, Ben is summoned for a debriefing by the Inspector General and other officials, who claim that Farah may not have been as innocent as she seemed. They present a photograph of a Russian agent, Karen Toff, who is suspected of assassinating 2 NATO operatives and working against Western interests. Confused, Ben asks what this has to do with Farah. The officials then question whether Farah was Karen's handler, a claim that enrages Ben. He defends Farah, insisting she was dedicated to the CIA's mission. The board proposes a polygraph test, which Ben accepts without hesitation. He believes the Inspector General is attempting to tarnish Farah's legacy, and his lawyer, Ted, agrees. Deputy Director Williams reassures Ben of his support, giving him hope that they can clear Farah's name. Though the doubts weigh heavily on him, Ben refuses to believe that the woman he loved and built a life with was a double agent. However, Ted warns him that the final decision rests with the Inspector General. Determined, Ben re-examines the details of the explosion, searching for anything he might have overlooked. When he attempts to enter CIA headquarters, he finds his security access revoked. IT specialist Desmond greets him and discreetly tells him to play along. He manages to get Ben through security, explaining that his access has been restricted due to the ongoing investigation. Knowing Ben is searching for answers, Desmond offers to help as he deeply respected Farah. They analyze international agencies operating in the area at the time of Farah's death, uncovering several, but one name stands out: Karen Taramov. Despite this lead, Ben doubts the FSB's involvement, convinced that Yevgeny wasn't behind it. Desmond offers to trace Ben's laptop activity to determine who has been monitoring him. Later, at home, Ben receives an anonymous email containing reports of attacks around the world and a cryptic message urging him to connect the dots. Meanwhile, Nick calls him back, revealing that he is relocated from France to Croatia with Veronique. They arrange to meet in France, but the call suddenly drops before finalizing their plans. Determined to uncover the truth, Ben heads to Budapest. A flashback reveals a moment shared between him and Farah during dinner, where she excitedly announces her promotion to Chief of Station. They reminisce about their early days in the agency, when their relationship was discouraged. As a symbol of her love, Farah gifts Ben a lucky pendant passed down through her family, asking him to keep it close. Upon arriving in Budapest, Ben seeks out his former partner and the new Chief of Station, John Branca, hoping for assistance in investigating Farah's death. However, Branca appears dismissive, insisting that there isn't enough evidence to challenge the Inspector General's report. Instead, he advises Ben to focus on his son and let the agency handle things. Sensing a shift in Branca's attitude, Ben thanks him and departs. He then visits the now-abandoned restaurant where the bombing occurred, reliving the harrowing memories of the explosion. With no support from the CIA, Ben turns to Hungarian intelligence chief Hitchens, who hesitates to get involved, fearing the risks. However, she shares a critical piece of evidence, a smart ring Farah was wearing at the time of her death. Hitchens believes Yevgeny's team hacked the device, tracking her movements. Whether Yevgeny orchestrated the attack remains uncertain, but she provides Ben with his current location. Additionally, she hands over Farah's emergency fund, urging him to use it to track Yevgeny. Desmond contacts Ben with alarming news. The spyware on his laptop is highly sophisticated, suggesting he is being closely monitored. With a warning to stay vigilant, Desmond ends the call. Determined, Ben tracks down Yevgeny at a casino and joins him at a poker table, flashing a large sum of cash to pique his interest. He demands answers about Farah, but Yevgeny remains cryptic, stating that America's greatest enemy is its own reflection. He refuses to disclose more, reminding Ben that they are still adversaries. When Yevgeny's men attempt to remove him, Ben unleashes his combat skills, swiftly incapacitating them. However, he is eventually held at gunpoint, forcing him to stand down. Impressed by Ben's determination, Yevgeny acknowledges his sincerity but warns that his emotions have clouded his judgment. Before Ben can press further, he is suddenly knocked unconscious. Meanwhile, Nick is at home when Veronique leaves to run errands. As he settles into work, armed men appear outside. One flashes a badge, urging Nick to come with them, warning that he is being hunted by killers. Fearing for his life, Nick complies. Ben regains consciousness in an undisclosed location, accusing Yevgeny of destroying his life and orchestrating Farah's murder. Yevgeny listens carefully, slowly realizing that Ben is on a personal mission to clear Farah's name. Instead of executing him, he unexpectedly orders Ben's release. Still convinced of Yevgeny's involvement, Ben demands answers, but Yevgeny insists he is mistaken. He then reveals surveillance footage from the night of the bombing, showing Karen Tolf shadowing them. Ben assumes he is FSB, but Yevgeny corrects him. Just as he is about to disclose the real identity of the mastermind, an assassination squad storms in, opening fire. Yevgeny and his men are gunned down. Ben barely escapes the hail of bullets, seeking cover as his pursuers close in. He hijacks a van and frantically calls Branka for help. As he speeds away, he loses control and crashes, flipping the vehicle. Climbing out, he finds himself surrounded, but Branka arrives just in time, rescuing him. Branka remarks that Ben is lucky, as FSB hit squads rarely fail. Suspicious, Ben questions how Branka got there so fast, learning that he had been tracking Yevgeny. Now convinced that Farah was murdered and he was framed, Ben remains uncertain about who orchestrated the setup. Branka urges him to lay low and arranges for him to be taken to a secure location. Meanwhile, Nick travels with the agents who inform him that a rogue FSB operative attempted to assassinate his father and that he is next on the hit list. Concerned for Veronique, Nick is reassured that she is in a safe place. Branka, revealing that he had been tracking Nick's phone, brings Ben to a boat serving as his operational base. He explains that the teams targeting him consist of former Chinese mercenaries now working for the Wagner Group. He then questions Ben about whether Farah gave him anything before her death. Sensing something is off, Ben denies receiving anything and asks to speak to Nick. Branka leads him to a satellite phone. Meanwhile, Nick arrives at a building and senses danger. He attacks his escorts trying to escape, but is quickly subdued at gunpoint. At the same time, Ben is escorted into a room, only to find himself surrounded by the same hit squad. Branka orders him to sit, and in that moment, Ben realizes Branka has betrayed him. Ben is strapped to a chair, facing brutal interrogation. He can't believe that Branka, a man he trusted for 8 years, has turned against him. But Branka is only interested in one thing, what Farah gave to him. When Ben insists that Farah gave him a family, a home, and a purpose, Branka demands privacy. Ben reminds him that he's trained to endure torture, but Branka starts inserting needles into his fingers, running electrical currents through his hands when he refuses to talk. As Ben slips into unconsciousness, he's jolted back with smelling salts, but he still refuses to break. Then, Branka is informed that Nick has arrived at the safe house, and he wonders if Nick can handle the same pain. Ben threatens to kill him if he touches Nick, but Branka leaves without a response. Another man enters to continue the torture, Karen. Ben asks for his name, preferring to know the people he kills. Karen responds by reminding him that Americans are not invincible, recalling how the head of the CIA was captured and executed in the 80s, just like the KGB chief. However, the KGB retaliated by kidnapping a terrorist leader's family member, mailing his body parts until their leader was freed. Just as Karen prepares to inflict pain, he is suddenly taken out, along with the other men, by Kristina Kalari, a Russian operative. Kristina frees Ben, but he is too weak to escape through her original route, forcing them to fight their way out. She deploys a flashbang, taking down multiple enemies, but Karen recovers and throws her overboard before attacking Ben. Despite his weakened state, Ben fights back. Karen wields a blade, but Ben dodges, disarms him, and uses his own pin to stab him. The fight spills onto the deck, where Ben finishes him off with a metal pipe, sending him overboard. Ben and Christina escape on her boat, and he questions whether he can trust her. She reminds him she just killed 8 mercenaries to save him. She then reveals she's following orders from Farah and asks if he still has the pendant she gave him. She explains that it's a key and she will take him to an address. Then comes another shocking revelation. The men who took Nick are the same ones who betrayed Farah. She had uncovered a money laundering scheme, but kept Ben in the dark after learning a US operative was behind it. Christina was part of Farah's 7-member team, but she is the only one still alive. She owes Farah her life and vows to help Ben take down those responsible. Meanwhile, Nick is locked in a room, surrounded by agents awaiting orders. Karen enters, taunting him by saying he resembles Farah. He reveals that Farah's biggest mistake was trusting him, confirming his role in her death. Christina takes Ben to a secure location with a locked room. The pendant unlocks it, revealing Farah's secret workspace. She explains that they had known each other long before they joined their respective agencies and were friends before anything else. Ben discovers a laptop containing damning evidence. Branca receiving bribes from foreign intelligence agencies and Deputy Director Williams, who had Farah killed. There is also footage of Farah meeting with Even, leading Ben to suspect she was working with him, but Christina cautions against jumping to conclusions. Ben calls Branca, stating he has the intel he wants. Branca proposes a trade, Nick for the intel, setting a time and place. Christina warns him that it's likely a trap, but Ben is willing to risk it. Despite her warning that handing over the intel would make Farah's death meaningless, Ben prioritizes getting Nick back. He sends the intel to Desmond for analysis before heading to the meeting spot. Christina positions herself as a sniper, while Ben approaches Branca and his men. The exchange seems to go as planned. Branca releases Nick, and Ben hands over the bag, vowing to disappear. But Branca has other plans. He signals his men, only for Christina to open fire. A shootout ensues, with Ben knocking Branca down, grabbing the bag, and escaping with Nick in a van. Branca and Karen pursue them, firing relentlessly. Ben hands Nick a gun, urging him to fight back. Though inexperienced, Nick does his best, but he eventually runs out of bullets. Branca gains on them, pulling up alongside. Ben executes a tactical maneuver, causing their car to crash. Branca is thrown clear, while Karen is impaled on the windshield. As he gloats about killing Farah, Nick silences him with an explosive round. Ben is proud of Nick, but there's no sign of Branca, leading him to suspect he survived. Determined to finish this, Ben tracks Branca down, leading to a brutal one-on-one fight. Branca starts strong, knocking Ben down, but Ben rallies, landing heavy blows before choking him unconscious. One of Branca's men arrives to retrieve him, but Ben warns him to walk away and not interfere. Christina briefly meets up with them, and Ben expresses his hope that they can work together in the future. She agrees before leaving. Ben then loads the bound Branca into a car and drives off. Later, he contacts Desmond, and together they devise a plan to expose Williams. Meanwhile, Williams is attending an international conference when every attendee's phone begins receiving intel about his crimes. The projector is hacked, displaying the damning evidence for all to see. Then, Even enters with his officers, addressing the room. He relishes seeing his enemies powerless before confirming Williams' guilt and ordering his immediate arrest. In the aftermath, Ben finally meets Veroni, who is now the French chief of station. Looking at Nick, Ben knows that Farah would be proud.